Hey guys, Eckhart Slaughter here, and welcome to this list of my 5 favorite Star Wars video games. And I get asked this one all the time, so I figured, hey, it deserves its own video. And if you're watching this less than, 7 days after I've uploaded it, it means that I'm still officially on vacation. Well, actually, I'm moving, but I'm kind of taking a little vacation from the channel. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. And I've got some stuff ready to upload for you guys, and I've got some surprises, and I've actually got some guest uploaders too, so I think everything is going to be okay. So there's just a few things about the list that I want to get out of the way right away, and the first is that, of course, I haven't played every Star Wars video game. So, for example, I haven't played Star Wars Republic Commando, and I know that that's blasphemy for many of you guys, but I just haven't, so there's no way it can be one of my 5 favorite games. The second is that this video isn't going to take my traditional list format. It's going to be more of a rambling video. I'm going to start talking about one game, and I'm going to talk until I run out of things to say, and I'm just going to put some basic gameplay, hopefully from that game, in the background, and I'll credit the original YouTube uploader for that video, either in the description or on the video itself, probably both. I do also just want to acknowledge right now that there are a few games that didn't make this list that were really close. So for example, the Force Unleashed games were close to making the list but didn't. Same with Star Wars Pod Racer and also Star Wars Empire at War. Alright, so let's get started. Number 5 is Star Wars Rogue Squadron for the N64, and I can't say enough about this game. It was, albeit a little bit basic for its time, but just the ability to actually fly as all the different kinds of ships in that game, X-Wings, A-Wings, even the Millennium Falcon, it was just so fun. And the story that it told was also pretty interesting. It could have just stuck with, the average movie places that we've been to, the average plot lines that we've explored, but it went completely new. I mean, you even get the expanded universe coming in a bit with the World Devastators in one of the final levels. And speaking of the final levels, the game was actually a good difficulty level. So even for me, I must have been probably 8 or so when I was playing it. I would struggle a few times, but if I was ever in too tricky of a spot, I would just pop the Millennium Falcon in and beat the level that way. Admittedly, though, Rogue One was not a perfect game, and there were a few things that I didn't really love about it. One of those was the AT-AT and just the tow cable mechanic, which is kind of ironic because the idea for that came from another game on this list, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But yeah, the tow cable mechanic was really hard, and the Corellia level kicked my ass over and over again. I remember that one AT-AT blowing up the Corellia skyscraper because I couldn't take it down, and I would have to start all over again. I also wasn't a huge fan of the escort missions, and there were a few, especially the ones where you had to escort things on the ground, whether it was like a tank or a train. Those TIE bombers, it just wasn't fun. You'd have to slow right down, stay with the vehicle, and it just kind of broke the fun of it. It's more fun to just zip around the map taking out TIE fighters rather than just protecting some sort of, ally. All in all, though, Rogue Squadron was a fun game with a really cool story and some really tight gameplay mechanics. So let's go on to number 4, and this is one of the most interesting games on the list, and it's Jedi Knight 2. So Jedi Knight 2, or as it's fully known, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, was a video game that came out in 2002 and was primarily a first-person / third-person action game. And for the first few levels of the game, you walked around with a blaster and you play as Kyle Katarn, who's a very fun character. But you walk around with a blaster, eventually you meet Luke Skywalker, you get your lightsaber and your Force abilities, and the game kind of completely changes from there. Also, like Rogue Squadron, it tells a story that's not one of the movies. It's set after the Galactic Civil War, and you're fighting the Imperial Remnant for most of the game, and Dark Jedi, and it's kind of very cheesy and very legendsy, but that's fun and it works really well for a video game setting. And one thing that works really well about this game actually is that it really makes you feel like a Jedi, and the second you get that lightsaber, the game completely changes. And I will say that I actually really enjoy the shooting sections. Like the first 4 or so levels, they're a lot of fun. Like the controls are really tight. I like the corridor shootouts, and I like shooting in hallways because it makes me feel like I'm fighting on the Death Star and about to jump into the garbage chute. I don't know if any of you guys felt that way, but in the 3rd level, there's a hallway that's the exact same as the detention block on the Death Star, and it's just a whole lot of fun to play. And I mentioned this in a previous video, but I think that this game actually does a better job than The Force Unleashed of making you feel like a Jedi. Because you have so much control over what you do. You have fine control over your lightsaber. You can change your fighting style. You've got different lightsaber styles. You've got powerful Force abilities that can actually be upgraded. You're very mobile. You can jump really high. You can do backflips off walls. It's just super, super cool. And of course, the atmosphere is just on point too. But this game, like, there's some things about this game that just drive me crazy. And the first one is, I think, one that most people relate to, and it's the puzzle mechanics. And some people like them, some people don't. Oftentimes, like, you'll have to do a lot of backtracking to find one little switch that you should have hit, and it's not really clear what you should have done. And there are a few levels that just, they'll drive you crazy because, like, you won't even know what to do. And it can get to be a little bit silly. Like, there'll be some sort of grate that you have to shoot at or something. Another thing is, I think this game is one of the worst levels in probably modern video game history, and that's the Nar Shaddaa level, which is shitty because that's the first level after you get your full lightsaber and your full working force powers, and you're basically put out in this open city, and the enemies are extremely accurate. They can snipe you from a mile away. There's no real guidance for where you're supposed to go, and it's just not a whole lot of fun, and it drove me crazy to play it. Last time I played it, I ended up having to use quick saves to get through the level, and that's really not a whole lot of fun. All in all, though, Jedi Outcast is a phenomenal game. It plays extremely, extremely well, and I hear it actually even plays better for the Xbox and the PC, although I haven't played that, but it's got some small issues, but overall, I would recommend this game to everyone without any questions asked, although that's true for all the games on this list, really. Number 3 is Shadows of the Empire, and I will admit, I am a little pro for this game. I'm a little too up on it, and that's largely because it was the first Star Wars video game that I really played. I know for a lot of people that's a game like TIE Fighter or X-Wing, but yeah, Shadows of the Empire was my game, and I will admit, it's not a perfect game, and sometimes it's not even a good game, but like that level in the asteroid field is not a whole lot of fun. You have to kill like 80 TIE Fighters, and it's actually completely ridiculous. But the one thing Shadows of the Empire gets 100% right is what it would, like, the feeling, the Star Wars feeling. And you play as this scoundrel named Dash Rendar, and he's kind of a Han Solo-like character, but he's got this cool little robot, and it's just a whole lot of fun. And what I like about this game really is that there's so many memorable levels, whether you're tracking down Boba Fett with the, like, I forget what song it is, but there's this music and it's just great, or you're fighting probably the most horrifying boss in Star Wars video game history, and it's IG-88 because he makes this really, really creepy gurgling sound, and you just gotta go look it up on your own. Or there's like a level where you're sneaking through the Imperial City on Coruscant, you have to fight sewer monsters, and it's just, there's so many good parts, and there's so much good music, and they just use the Star Wars brand so well. And I know that this game is generally kind of mediocrely regarded, but it's just got a special place in my heart, and like when I look at it rationally, I know that it probably shouldn't be the third game on this list. But I mean, if you've ever played that Skyhook battle as a kid, it's just so cool, and I always wondered whether Dash Rendar survived, but I was never good enough to beat the game on hard. And the game was hard. Like, that battle against IG-88 was pretty tough, and that battle, especially against Boba Fett, where he's got you have to kill him and then the Slave One, that is really tough. On the other hand, number 2 is probably one of the most highly regarded Star Wars video games, and I think that's because anyone who's played it just realizes how fun it is, and that's Star Wars Battlefront 2. And again, this is probably, pound for pound, the most fun Star Wars game that's ever existed. Certainly in my mind, if you have some friends, you can get them all together, sit them on a couch, and play some galactic conquest, and that's what my buddies and I would always do. We'd play for hours and hours on end. 2 of us would be on one side, 2 of us would be on the other side. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. But it was at least Battlefront 1, and I'm kind of counting both the Battlefront games in here. At least Battlefront 1 was kind of unfair because some maps heavily favored one side. Like, I remember the Battle of Kashyyyk was really unfair for, I think, the Confederacy, and similarly, like, the Battle of Hoth would be unfair for one team. But still, so much fun. And this game had just a multitude of problems. Like, the AI sucked and the graphics weren't really very good. Like, I remember my friends and I was always laugh because you'd zoom in on a computer controlled like clone trooper, for example, and they would just roll away because they could somehow detect that you were looking at them. And it wasn't very realistic or anything, but I mean, that didn't matter just because the game was so fun. But it's really hard to explain why it was so fun if you've never played it. I think there were a few things, and the first was the vehicles. Every map had, well, not every map every map had ground vehicles at least. Maybe that there were, I think, a couple of maps in the second one that didn't, but most maps had ground vehicles, and then most had air vehicles as well, whether it's like an X-Wing or a TIE bomber, whatever. So that's really cool. Like, you actually fight for control of the vehicle spawn points. You don't call them in via star card or whatever you do in the new Battlefront game. And that was a ton of fun. And it's just really cool to see something off in the distance, run to it, jump in, then, get to work. Another thing I think was how the game worked. Like, it was kind of like a conquest mode, but it's hard to explain. Like, there was a conquest mode and also lives at the top, and the battle would actually shift as you managed to capture control points, and because it would kind of limit where the enemy could spawn. It's kind of like a traditional Battlefield type of gameplay, but it worked really well with the Battlefront engine and on the Battlefront. Just the maps and with the vehicle support, it was all just a whole lot of fun. And I'm sure some of this is me, putting my rose-tinted glasses on, but like besides for probably playing games of Halo 1 and Halo 3 and Halo 2, playing this game with my buddies was probably the most fun I've had on a video game, period. So number one is probably not only my favorite Star Wars video game, but I think you could make a very strong argument that it's the best Star Wars video game in history. Not only that, it's one of the best, not only RPGs, but one of the best video games ever made, and it's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And when I say that, of course, I'm counting Knights of the Old Republic 1 as well as 2, although personally 1 was my favorite. 2 was still very, very good, and the difference between the two is kind of interesting. 1 was pretty lighthearted, like it was a traditional Star Wars romp through the galaxy. Darth Malak was certainly a little cheesy, and he was kind of campy. He had like a very evil laugh. And then you get to like KOTOR 2, and you've got an enemy whose skin is falling off, and he's like being held together just by the dark side of the Force. You've got this mentor who turns against you and turns it to be some sort of Jedi-Sith hybrid, like really gray Jedi. And then you've got this very, very disturbing and creepy Sith Lord who speaks in garbly language and eats things with the Force. And just the change between the two games is a little striking, but I haven't even talked about why they're so fun. And it's just, I've mentioned that all these games, and what I really like about all of them is that they make you feel like they're part of the Star Wars universe. And in my mind, that's something that Battlefield 1 didn't really do, for example. But yeah, they make you feel like you're part of the Star Wars universe, and that's something that KOTOR does better than all of the others. You go on these planets, and usually the game has 5 or 6 planets, and you just kind of see how things work. Like, you see every type of life, whether it's the Ragghoul-infested lower level people on Taris to, the creatures on Manon and everything else. And the story is super compelling, especially in KOTOR 1 with the twist, which I won't get to. But that and the RPG mechanics are solid. It's kind of like a hybrid of a regular RPG where you can stop everything and micro-control your characters, or you can just let it play out. I mean, the characters in Knights of the Old Republic, like both games, not only the ones that you meet and, of course, the ones who you are, but just like the little side characters, the ones who you get a little glimpse of their story and they ask you to do a little favor for them, or maybe not even that. Maybe you just have a very brief interaction with them and there's nothing you can do. It's all very fun. And I just recently played through Knights of the Old Republic 1 again on my Android phone, and just playing it again, it's so much fun. And not only that, like it's addicting. Like, I was like, every minute I was like getting a couple levels in or whatever, or progressing as far as I can. And it's just fun that you can control your own destiny too. Like, this time I played as a force wielding Sith Lord, who, although I treated my companions well, I didn't treat like the average person well, and I would force choke someone if it meant that I'd get an extra 50 credits. And it's fun to kind of role play as that, and like to be able to choose your own force powers and your own class. And the games, they just add so much to the universe, whether through obviously the gameplay and the mechanics it introduces, like the Jedi classes, or the actual stories like Revan and Malak and the Jedi Sith Wars and everything like that. The way they explore the Mandalorian history, and it's just, there's even a brief mention of the Yuzang Vong in the first one, by Canderous, whose voice actor just died actually, so rest in peace. But just everything about those games is solid, and I believe that if there's no remake, which I think there may be in the works, a remake in the works, even if there's not though, Disney is obviously going to recanonize the games in some way, whether that's like a standalone novel or a comic, probably not a TV show, because I really don't think that era really appeals to the average Star Wars fan. It's more the hardcore fan, but still. Great game. The best Star Wars game of all time, I think. I would argue that point. One of the best RPGs of all time. The golden era of RPGs, too. And it's just my favorite Star Wars game ever. So, thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my list, what your favorite Star Wars game is, and I would really like to hear what videos you guys most want to see when I come back from my break. Again, I've got stuff set to upload. Hopefully, it probably won't be every day like you guys are used to, but hopefully every couple of days at least. But yeah, what do you want to see when I come back? Let me know down in the comments. I'm going to be reading every single comment posted here when I get back, and I'll probably take the top 3, I'll make them into a video, and I'll directly link to the person who suggested it. So make sure you give thumbs up to the comments that you guys like too. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Eckhart's Ladder. I can't wait to get back to speak to you guys. May the Force be with you.